Hello and welcome to our session on social recruiting, how you can leverage your employer brand to engage quality talent. My name is Tim Grogan. I'm head of the solutions here at LinkedIn across Asia Pacific. Just to give you some context, my background for the last 10 years has been working in helping global organisations develop their employer brands, but more importantly, how do you start to articulate and communicate that proposition, more importantly, to the people that you ultimately want to influence and help you achieve your hiring objectives. I think it's good to take a step back when we start to think about this notion of social recruiting and in particular employer branding strategy. And let's focus on what we understand about branding. Here you can see two global brands that we all know. In fact, these brands have influenced our lives in a way in which we're aligned to a brand, we have a perception of one of these brands, we might not even like these brands. In some way, the communication and the engagement with even the product has created a point of view that we have and that we may share with our friends, or we may not. And one of the things that is clear, if we looked at these two brands and I put it to you, the audience, and asked you which one you prefer or where your allegiance may lie, more often than not you find that people are aligned to one brand. Half of you may prefer Coke, the other half may prefer Pepsi. The point is you have an opinion, you have a perception, you have an understanding of what these brands mean to you. But if I put the question in a different way, if I put the question to you as to which brand would you prefer to work for, how confident would you be in your answer? How confident would you be in your understanding of what the experience would be like between an employer and an employee? And what this does and what this brings us into the frame is that actually there's two sides to the branding equation. There's the consumer brand, the brand that we engage with on a day-to-day or a weekly basis. But then there's the employer brand. That brand, that relationship between the employee and the employer. That's that contract that exists between an organisation and their employees based on the level of engagement and based on the overall individual's performance and how well they feel they fit into that organisation that they work for. And so when we start to think about employer branding, we actually define it in a very simple way. The unique and differentiating promise a business makes to its employees and potential candidates. And I think there's a couple of key words that we should focus on. Differentiating promise. Differentiating promise. What does that mean? How does a Coke or a Pepsi, for example, differentiate themselves to an employee that creates a level of engagement, a meaningful relationship in which one feels heightened in their confidence and their ability to leverage what they have to provide value back to that organisation? And how do they then communicate that both internally and externally? Because it means something when you're a part of an organisation, you're living, eating and you're breathing that on a day-to-day basis. But what does that mean to a potential candidate? Someone who works with the skill sets that one of those brands would ultimately like to bring into that organisation to help create that competitive advantage. How do they get that message out to those people? And that's really the art of employer branding, how we tell that story, simple storytelling outside of the organisation to create influence, awareness and ultimately competitive advantage through quality talent. And one of the things that we know from the last 15 years where organisations have been very focused on creating strategic advantage by leveraging their employer brand is that you can start to get incredible return on investment when you're very proactive in how you articulate that message. You can see the statistics here are very compelling. For example, what we know is that if you articulate that story, if you tell that brand story in a way that's consistent throughout the recruitment process, the people who join that organisation are going to be more engaged and stay longer within your organisation. So it has a huge impact on retention. What we also know is that people don't just join for remuneration. People join for a variety of attributes, whether it be work-life balance, whether it be the camaraderie with colleagues, or whether it be the kind of career development opportunities that may exist for them within that organisation. And so what we can see when you articulate that story, when you share the variety of attributes that exist to attract and commit talent, what we see is that there's a cost per hire significantly comes down, meaning you don't have to pay people as much as you might not have to if you were sort of a brand that was the best kept secret and might have been a perceived risk. What we also know for companies who leverage that brand in a very proactive way is that they start to build relationships outside of some of the core areas, and in particular some of the strategic areas that they like to recruit, and they start to develop a relationship and awareness, which we're going to talk to about today. And what's really interesting is that the survey that we recently did showed that 91% of companies are going to increase or maintain the existing investment they made in sharing and articulating that employer brand. And what's really interesting is you hear a lot of organisations talk about, well, our company name is so well known that we don't have to undertake any type of employer branding. But what our research has told us is that an employer brand is twice as likely to drive job consideration as a company brand. Let me show you a really simple example of where a client shared an example of this with me. It's a global energy company. And when we spoke to their HR leadership team, one of the things when we're talking about some of the business problems that they were facing, they spoke about sales and marketing as being one of the key labour segments that they were having a lot of difficulty in attracting. And so when we sort of did a deep dive on that to really understand what did that mean, it was basically clear that sales and marketing professions outside of this organisation didn't understand or perceive that company to be an employer of choice because they didn't understand the opportunities that would be available to them should they join. And so what they had is their company name, whilst it was well known, they were misunderstood within that labour segment that actually was key and quite strategic to how they grew as an organisation. And so that had a huge impact. Their time to hire was lengthened. Their often cost per hire was higher because they had to find external parties and partners to try to find and almost, turn and change the perception that their brand had within this area. And so that's a good indication where it doesn't matter if your company brand is well known, it's the labour segments and the understanding and the awareness in the areas that you strategically recruit, is often where you need to do a lot more work to get a huge return on investment to help the company understand that the brand has two parts, or a two-part equation. And so while we're on the whole Coca-Cola theme and the Pepsi theme, I think it's interesting to point out an example of where one of these organisations is actually taking the time to consistently communicate a one brand theme. And for Pepsi, that's possibilities. And if you go to visit the homepage here, whether it be their corporate website or their careers page on LinkedIn, what you'll see is how they articulate the possibilities brand in a way that actually compels you to have a deeper understanding of what it means for an employee to be part of that story. And what's interesting when you look and really understand the impact Pepsi have on their brand proposition is that there's a consistent touch points of how they tell that possibility story. From the moment that you show interest and they send you an email thanking you for applying, or whether you go for that first interview and the room that you are in is branded possibilities, or ultimately to the job offer that you get is branded possibilities. And it doesn't stop when you start and join the organisation, from your onboarding right up and through to training and development. And so, what's interesting is when we globally took a viewpoint as to where people are at and what is the global average on an adoption of employer branding and investment, what we can see, in particular in APAC, it's interesting to see that India is there at 77%, Australia is not that far behind at 73%. And so within Asia Pacific, we're really seeing an emerging change in the way, whether it be because of some of the significant talent changes within the region, or some of the developing, and in particular you think of the booming economy Australia recently has had through the mining industry, or some of the tech developments that are happening in India are impacting the war for talent, heightening that, and really transforming the way companies having to strategically position themselves to articulate their story to influence and attract quality talent. And I want to share with you what we're seeing as an emergence. Social media, we know, is changing the way we communicate, the way we interact, the way we engage, and the way we actually start to tell our stories, whether it be both from a personal perspective as well as a corporate perspective. And what we're seeing here at LinkedIn is now there's an extension and a change that's happening in the way brands, from an employment perspective, need to think about how they're engaging and influencing passive talent. And what we're terming that as this emergence of what we see as a new term is we're calling talent brand. Talent brand is really, if you think about it, it's what people say about your company behind closed doors. It's what they say about you when they leave the room. It's what they're talking about you in communities, both in the physical world and online, of course. And this talent brand is something where dialogue needs to be almost intercepted. It's almost where you need to start to have a voice, to participate, to share, to ultimately influence, so that you can help people understand the real meaning of what that proposition is, and what is your journey, and what is your, I suppose, strategy on how you're looking to change and influence business from your own perspective within your own company. And so if you visually want to think about it, what started with your EVP back to the days in the early 2000s when Corporate Leadership Council really coined this phrase from their significant global research, to the evolution of how you tell that story through your brand. And it is storytelling, the consistency of that storytelling, how you articulate that story. And the next evolution with the technological changes and the social platforms where millions and millions of people are now sharing and engaging is influencing that brand. And that story is starting to feed on its own. And that now gives you a good viewpoint of where you need to start to think about the evolution from your employer brand to your talent brand. And need to start to think about what are your strategies to participate, engage, and ultimately influence. And when you look at the change in mindset, and this is not just limited to the talent space, but this is happening within the whole marketing circles. And today, HR's challenge is to become more marketing focused. It's really goodbye control, hello influence. Today, your brand is two-way. Today, you need to participate and think in a way that actually can influence and yet create content that provides people with an objective viewpoint as to who you are, an authentic voice that helps them understand the opportunities and also the shortcomings of your organisation. It's got to be tainted a little bit with some of those negativities, but how do you actually help them understand the real story? And today we want to walk through some of the things that you can start to do to actually start to influence that brand in a way that can actually influence and create opportunity for the people that are most important and strategically aligned to your business. So let's think about this journey. What we're talking about here is the evolution from to talent brand is companies are now starting to move from a reactive recruitment model, what we call, into a proactive state. From the traditional, emerging and foundational, ultimately to the strategic. From focusing on companies in a traditional world, focusing on quantity, high quantity, high volumes of people, to that real move towards a quality play, to content-led as opposed to transactionally focused. This shift is changing the fabric of HR. It's changing the quality of people within the HR circles as to how you need to think about winning that war for talent. And it's actually what we're seeing is a change of roles. New roles are coming to organisations. Certainly in Asia Pacific now we're seeing a lot more people whose job is to manage the employer brand. We're seeing other companies who have roles such as community manager. These are really marketing sort of styled led resources that are now becoming a fabric of the HR community. And to get onto this journey, you need to start to think about what is the business problem you're trying to solve. And when we start to think about business problems, when we start to think about strategically how do you maximise the impact or leverage your story in a way to create that competitive advantage, you need to think objectively about talent within your organisation. What is the most important talent that impacts your business to achieve the goals, the objectives that has been set by the leadership for that business, whether it be both local or global? And when you start to be objective about that, you often can define talent really to three core key areas that are either linked to metrics such as the longest time to fill, the highest cost per hire, or where quality historically has been most challenging because of the competitive nature of that industry. And when you start to define that for your organisation, that becomes the foundation of which you need to start to think about how you proactively leverage that brand and ultimately influence and engage passive talent. And what we know about talent is we know that if we use these words active and passive, we know that 10% of active candidates are out in that marketplace looking for a role, but that 90% are quite comfortable, happy, engaged with the current situation that they have. That is where the opportunity exists for organisations to positively leverage their brand and align it with these strategic labour segments, whether it be HR, sales and finance, as an example of an organisation we could take, to think about how do we start to get and leverage and tell that story in a way that's going to create ultimately competitive advantage through our people. So how can you leverage your employer brand on LinkedIn to positively influence your talent brand? And to really do that, back to those labour segments, it starts with the employment opportunity. What's the employment opportunity you have today or tomorrow? And that really starts with your jobs. how do you socialise your jobs in a way to the people who aren't actually looking for a role? And this is what's really fundamentally transformational at LinkedIn, the uniqueness of our platform, how our members are engaged with our platform based on their management of their identity, on the ability to be more insightful and educated based on the information, the wealth of data that's shared on LinkedIn, or the mobility in which they can access this information, whether it be through their iPad or their mobile phone. Whatever the engagement is or whatever the use is and how they're using LinkedIn, what we're able to do is uniquely identify who they are based on their identity, based on the definition of who they are, the job they're in, the company they work for, the location they're based. And those jobs that our clients are putting within our platform, within the ecosystem of LinkedIn, is being socially connected and shared directly to the people that are most aligned based on the information that's contained in the job. So whether it be Steve or whether it be Erica, Steve, our HR director, the jobs he sees when he logs into LinkedIn under jobs you may be interested in are HR jobs. Same with Erica, account executive jobs, and Brian, finance roles. And so this unique opportunity for, in this instance, Steve, who perhaps is not looking for a role, who's using LinkedIn to help him understand the power of his network and use that to find out what's happening in one of our key insight platforms such as LinkedIn Today. Steve sees the role that's of interest to him and he clicks on that and he reads that job. And that could be his first initiation or understanding of your company that he's never even perhaps even heard of before. And that information, the way you've articulated that opportunity, thought of Steve and what is it in it for him and articulated that story to Steve, creates a level of interest. And that's the start of that relationship where he wants more. In fact, when I think about the power of this platform, I'm reminded of a lunch with a good friend of mine not that long ago when we sat down and partner in a very senior firm. A classic example of what I would define as a passive candidate, but very powerful user of LinkedIn based on his global network and his own reputation within Australia. And what he was shared with me that day is that, hey Tim, I was on LinkedIn today and I saw a job on LinkedIn. It was like it was written for me. And when he coined that phrase, I thought, well, if that's not your stereo exactly what we're talking about, a passive candidate, I don't know what is. And that's one of the real leverage points to start to think about how do we engage or interact with that person to create that, provide him more information that will help him in his decision-making process. I want to pause on that for a second and I want to talk to you about another key element of social recruiting. Today, what we can tell you is that when you talk to any organisation, when they talk about where does true talent, the best talent come from, one of the adages you've heard is that best talent comes from our own people. People who are already working for our organisation. It's their networks, it's their relationships, it's their understanding of our brand enables them to socialise that in a way that has a very powerful impact. And it's their referrals back to us that helps us grow and build on as like-minded people. One of the challenges, of course, with this notion of referring people into your organisation is there's often a communication breakdown. People often aren't aware of the roles that are open. People often can't even think of who do they know in their network off the top of their head at any one given time when they first see an opportunity. They often need a spark. And so you often see a lot of shortcomings on how people engage their workforce to drive and leverage quality talent. And what's unique to LinkedIn, of course, is we're able to share with any organisation how many of our members come from their company. We can give them statistics such as how many people view their profile, what type of companies that they come from, and what kind of industries do they work in. This is unique data to LinkedIn based on that level of interaction, based on that level of engagement on our platform. And what things that's very important when you think of the word social recruiting is how do we leverage your people? How do we leverage their networks? How do we maximise the opportunity of putting the right jobs in front of their networks? And one of the most powerful advertising products that we have that is really at the cornerstone of social recruiting is that we want to leverage, and we can leverage your employees in a way that should someone be looking at their profile because of they met them that day and they want to know more about them because of the way they communicated in a group, or for the fact that they posted something on LinkedIn that was so profound and got shared, someone wanted to know more about who actually generated the content. When that one person shows interest in that person's profile, we can show a job that you can see on the top right-hand corner that actually shows the career opportunities available to that person who's looking at that profile. this advertising product we call Work With Us. It's an invitation for someone who's viewing your employees' profiles to work for you. And not only do we position it as a brand opportunity, but we actually socialise the jobs that are aligned to that person's professional identity. That's social recruiting, and that's leverage and that's scale. One of the other big changes in the way people start thinking about influencing the talent brand and actually in creating that level of engagement with quality talent is to starting to say, well, hang on a second. We understand our proposition. We understand what's unique to our organisation. We know where we have competitive advantage. We understand the people we compete for top talent. And what we're able to do is leverage directly this message on behalf of, say, a brand like BP that says to us, you know what, labour segments that are critical to our business is engineering. And we want to actually help more engineers understand about the exciting career opportunities available to them for BP. And so as you can see, the targeting on the right-hand side gives you a sense of how digital is changing the way people can communicate with such laser-like accuracy that there's no wasted ads anymore. That the advertisements or the messaging that we want people to see is directly in line with their business needs. We are socialising and increasing the awareness of that opportunity in a way that is creating a heightened level of awareness and engagement that the people want more information. And at a click of that ad, we can drive them directly back to what we call our corporate careers page on LinkedIn. Let me take a step back here and understand what we're talking about here. Above the red line, most organisations have a corporate website. And certainly what we're seeing across Asia Pacific, there's varying degrees of how many people then have a careers presence on that corporate website. Certainly in Southeast Asia, it's emerging where more and more people are doing it. We're seeing less so in a country like China. But we're seeing huge growth in areas like India and Australia where it's very common practice to have a careers tab associated to your careers website. What's interesting though, of course, is the challenges that businesses have. The challenges that businesses have is how do you engage and attract the right type of person to come visit your corporate website, to actually read your careers pages. Back to the adage, 10% of people are active job seekers, 90% are passive. So what often happens is people are saying we have traffic, but we don't have the right quality of people showing interest in our organisation. And so today, if we go below the line, what you're seeing is almost leading organisations, strategic organisations, who are taking a proactive approach to talent, are actually strategically saying, we know who we want to influence. We know the type of talent that we want in our organisation. Take to the HR, the finance, the sales, that kind of targeting, back to the PP example, that we can show and create and influence their awareness of that brand. And at a click of that button, we can drive traffic directly to our corporate LinkedIn careers webpage. And that page has enabled you to actually has a personalised viewpoint where you can see information that's relevant to you, jobs in line with your own background, videos from people who work there, testimonials, people in your network associated with the brand, updates, banners, pictures, information that helps you get a viewpoint and an understanding of what it would like to work for that organisation. Engaging content that helps you as potentially a passive candidate who just saw perhaps a banner ad or actually saw a job, wanted a bit more information to help you get a more insight about what that company is and what would that mean to you. Creating interest and ultimately driving a level of engagement to someone who perhaps was not even looking for a role prior to seeing that communication. That's social recruiting, and that's leveraging information in a platform with one click, with ease within which you can get to that next step to create that level of engagement. What's more interesting is that once you have someone there, you've captured that information, they're on your own careers page. They might not be ready to leave their role. It might be interesting to them, but they may feel, I want 6 months more time, I need to finish my project, I've got a couple of things on, wife's having a baby, whatever that may be, their timing might not be right to leave. But they're interested in your company. There's a level of relationship there. And at a click of a button, we have this unique ability for you to follow that company on LinkedIn. What that means is just as me, as a member on LinkedIn, I have 500 plus connections. They're my personal connections. A company can have personal connections. We call them followers. And once someone is following you, once a member is following you, you have a direct ability to actually share any information you like to that member. You can send what we call company status updates. Status updates are text-based, visual information that helps personalise influence, and share content relevant to your brand. And this develops deeper relationships with our members to help you really understand the opportunities that exist in your organisation and build deeper relationships. And what the evidence suggests is that 70% of people who are following your company are not only open for career opportunities, but are easily searchable and found through our powerful platform on Recruiter. Recruiter, of course, is one of the foundational products within the talent solutions that we have here at LinkedIn. It was our first product that we launched to the market that gave you laser-like influence where you could search, select and engage the talent based on the various filters that we have available in line with your business needs. And what's really exciting today is how we're evolving that platform to actually link back to the work your brand is doing, the influence that you're having, and the level of engagement you have with those followers. And so you can see on the slide here a little person who's got his hand up, or her hand up. This person is suggesting that they are following you on LinkedIn. And what instantly happens then is you know that there's a level of understanding. In fact, research is suggesting that over 80% of people who are following on LinkedIn are open to responding to what we call an in-mail. An in-mail is the ability for your recruiter, your talent acquisition expert, to send a direct message to that person who's interested in your career opportunities. And so here is how the searching works, and ultimately here is Pierre, exactly the type of person we want in our organisation, and we know who are following, and we will send him that in-mail. So we understand social recruiting. We understand the impact a proactive approach can have on how you can leverage that brand, how can you leverage your people, and how your jobs, your people, and your corporate messaging around your careers presence within LinkedIn create a very robust and accurate way to reflect your brand proposition. But how do you measure success? How do you know if you're doing a better job than your competitors? How do you help and have a viewpoint when you're speaking to your directors or your stakeholders or your shareholders as to the kind of impact your business is having in the marketplace, knowing the strategic competitive advantage that is available when you acquire and engage the right quality of talent? And I'm really excited to share with you today an initiative that's really been launched over the last 12 months here at LinkedIn, and it's having a profound impact on how people think about talent and how people look at the way they are not only actively competing, but the efficiency and effectiveness of how their recruitment team is working. Let me talk to you and share with you the Talent Brand Index. So how do we define the Talent Brand Index? Well, it starts with what we define as reach, awareness. How aware are people of your brand? Now, in this instance, taking a company called XYZ, we're able to use the various data we have on LinkedIn to help you get an assessment based on the 200 million members that we have on the platform. The data points that we look at, of course, are how connected your employees are on LinkedIn, how many members are connected to them based on their own management of their own identity, and how many people are viewing their profiles based on their own connectivity and based on their own interaction with the platform. Those data points help us get a viewpoint of the reach, how familiar they are of you as an employer. 745,000. So we think that's interesting, but what we really want to know is how many people are really engaged with the brand. What does that mean in a context of actually recruiting and engaging passive and active talent? And what we are able to do is then look at 3 other data points that are of interest to define engagement, people who are interested in you as an employer. 1, your company and your careers presence on LinkedIn, as we shared, the way you can socialise your story on the platform and leverage their interactions and awareness of your brand. The ability to follow your company. And of course, they're actively viewing and applying for your jobs online. In this instance, we can see that the statistic here is 116,000. And so what we're able to do is start to take that data and take those numbers and actually define and create a brand index for your brand. Engagement over reach is a 16%. And 16% gives us a sense of how attractive candidates perceive your organisation. It's an interesting data point, but on its own, it lacks context. Is that good? Is that bad? What do I do with that information? How does that help me influence and, more importantly, share objectively the impact I feel we as a team are having on our business? And this is what I want to share with you now. What we're able to do, and when you start to become strategic in the way you communicate and leverage your employer brand and ultimately influence your talent brand, it's important to understand if not only your labour segments that you compete in, but who are the people that you compete for in talent? Who are the people that you lose talent to, and who are the people that you ultimately want to engage talent to bring into the organisation? By taking your talent brand index and aligning that with the competitive peers that you've identified, we can show where you lie in that gradient of being an employer of choice or having a weaker employer brand. That becomes a very interesting statistic. That gives the context to the 16%. And in this instance, in this mock instance, we can see that 16% company XYZ is doing okay. But however, someone's doing a better job at 24%. What does that mean? And how do they action that to actually start to think about what their strategy should be in the next 6 to 12 months? And this is where the next bit of data, the data that we have that we can look at and provide you when you're understanding and leveraging the platform when you're undertaking social recruiting. We can actually take that talent brand index and we can break that down. And so in this instance, we can see the company XYZ is doing fine for engineering. In fact, doing really well for engineering. But interesting, they're not doing so well for IT. It's a lot lower than what it is for engineering. And if you think about this organisation, that might be where they're actually having a lot of difficulty. That might be where they feel they're overpaying higher wages above the norm. That might be where it takes longer to fill those roles. That might be where the talent they have within there is of a substandard than what the business actually needs. And that's the feedback that you've got in your recent performance review from the key hiring manager from the IT division. And that's when you start to think about, how do we influence that? How do we change that statistic? How do we start to socialise our brand, our story, leverage the power of the platform to start to help more IT professionals understand what it's like to work for us? How do we know we're doing things better than our competitors? Are we telling the story? Are we making our story scalable? That's social recruiting. And we can also, depending if you're geographically aligned or have a presence outside of a country, whether it be Australia, India, or across Southeast Asia, what is your challenges geographically? Your brand might be better understood in certain countries than it is in others. Once again, this type of data, this type of insight helps you understand the challenges or reinforce your perceptions of the challenges that exist. But using this data to go back and not only influence your leaders, but the people you want to collaborate within the organisation, whether it be marketing, internal comms, or ultimately the finance director, to help get more money to actually understand this is the strategies we want to put in place. We're taking a proactive approach, leveraging social recruiting platforms to actually help socialise and build a story to create competitive advantage by engaging passive talent. And so over time, we can start to measure that impact you're having. As you lay the foundation, as you start to elevate your story, is in fact to socialise and build long-term relationships, whether it be through your followers, whether it be through creation of groups, or whether it be through the brand initiatives and campaign initiatives that you feel in line with your overall objectives, we can sustain and show that impact. And that becomes a statistic. This data point, this talent brand index, becomes the roadmap for in which you start to think about your own evolution from being a reactive, transactional-based recruiter to someone who moves to that strategic phase for where you think about quality, proactive, leveraging your content, building your story, and seeing the talent brand index, which becomes a representative of how efficiently and effectively you're engaging talent. One of the things that I'm excited to share is we've developed what we call an employer brand playbook. It's over 50 pages of incredible content where we've really taken the time to actually help articulate how organisations can start to not only think about developing and building an employer brand, but ultimately starting to influence and impact the talent brand and actually move from this transactional-based traditional recruitment that exists still today into leveraging a powerful platform like LinkedIn and understanding the foundational impact social recruiting can have on the way you engage quality talent. Thanks for your time. I hope you found this insightful. Please download and visit the URL here on the page to get more information. And for further information, please feel free to contact either your relationship manager or your account executive. Thanks. Bye for now.